What a time to be alive. What a time to be watching the sweat. That's exactly what you are doing right now. To my left, Jessie Coffield. To her right, Emerson Lotzia. And we do this every night, ladies and gentlemen.
We also bring in some of the top analysts in the business, guys like DK Live's Reed Fowler and Steve Buchanan, as well as Ryan Noonan of the Quant Edge.
Gentlemen, settle down, please. It's Tuesday, Waiver Wire Tuesday, peeping some of the best options that could be available for Week 11 and all those season-long leagues.
Yeah, a couple of running backs with low ownership had pretty big games last week, like Derrick Henry and Rashad Penny. If you need a ball carrier this week, who should you pick up, Steven?
Yeah, I think Penny's the option here. I mean, overall, I don't think this is really a strong week for running backs off the waiver wire. We saw Penny out-snap Mike Davis 39-27 last week, but I think we have to also take a cautious approach here. You know, when Chris Carson is healthy, we could end up seeing a three-back approach here, which probably wouldn't be ideal, or maybe even worse. Penny doesn't even just get the carries there, but we'll know pretty quickly because the Seahawks are matched up against the Packers here on Thursday. Matchup is middle of the road against the Packers at best. They haven't really been good against the run, but they haven't been bad either, so we'll learn quickly what they're going to do here.
Hey, Ryan, which running backs do you have your eye on?
Steven's point, at this point of the season, we're really not going to get anything better than a three-headed monster share. We're scraping the bottom of the barrel here. I think Theo Riddick is worth a look in deeper PPR leagues. He's essentially acting as the de facto slot receiver now that Golden Tate is gone in Philadelphia. He may not get a single carry, but in his current role, he still has a ton of value. He's hauled in 13 balls on 15 targets over the past 2 weeks since the trade. The Lions are a home underdog this week against Carolina, so should be some advantageous game script, and I like him in PPR.
Reed, who are you looking at?
Yeah, I think you have to look at the Seattle backfield first. Like if someone didn't pick up Mike Davis, even Rashad Penny, like Steve was mentioning. But in terms of just repeating what he said, because he's right. I mean, these guys run the ball quite a bit. They're the number one team in terms of how the percentage of their plays and the yards coming from the run. I think they're top 3 in yards coming from the run. Do speculative ads too. If you're in season long and you have guys like Kareem Hunt, Todd Gurley, go pick up Spencer Ware, because this is the point in time where you don't necessarily need depth, but you want to make sure that ceiling, especially with these offenses like Kansas City, like the Rams, if those guys go down, Spencer Ware fits into that where you can get top 15 RB value back right away. And so if you have the roster space and you're good at this point, especially if you've had Kareem Hunt, go at Spencer Ware, because we've seen he has value even when he comes in for 15, 20 snaps. He's getting double digit, or he got a touchdown last week. So he still has standalone value, but more so on the insurance side.
All right, let's talk receivers. Anthony Miller with a huge game for the Bears last week and now has a touchdown in 3 of his last 5 games.
That's good.
Very good. What makes you think he's the best option at wideout, or maybe you don't, Reed?
Yeah, no, I think he is. You see the connection that he has with Trubisky, and like you mentioned, right, he's seeing a lot of targets in the last 4 games, and he's seeing touchdowns, right? He's returning value. Those 6 targets in the last 4 games on average, 70% of snaps out of the slot. And if there's one spot where we do see a chink in the armor for Minnesota, it's defending the slot. And Anthony Miller is a guy that we've seen, especially in the preseason coming into this, that they were really utilizing this guy. Trubisky finds it very comfortable. Even Taylor Gabriel, for that matter. This entire offense is playing a lot better. Trubisky, we've seen the stats before. Since about week 5, he's been the #1 quarterback in fantasy football in season long. So if you have the #1 guy, Anthony Miller is 14% owned, so he's probably available in your league, so go pick him up.
Steve, what do you think? Anthony Miller, is he going to be best, or like Dante Moncrief, Willie Snead the 11th, or Josh Reynolds?
Yeah, I mean, I think Miller is the option here. But, you know, I just want to talk about Moncrief a little bit. I mean, he's quickly become a pivotal part of that Jaguars offense. He's seen 21 targets over the last 3 weeks, catching 14 of those for 228 yards and a touchdown. Now he gets a really good matchup against the Steelers. I mean, they've allowed an average of 40.3 DK fantasy points on the year per game to opposing wideouts. And look, the return of Leonard Fournette didn't really stop Bortles from chucking the ball. Last week, he did it 38 times for 320 yards against the Colts. So if they're going to kind of go with that sort of mentality, mixing in Fournette and having Bortles throw, I think Moncrief's in a really good spot here for this week in particular.
What do you think here, Ryan? Because Cooper Kupp's out, so maybe Josh Reynolds there with the Rams?
Yeah, really interested in Josh Reynolds. Obviously, Cooper Kupp going down is a huge loss for the Rams, but it does, from a fantasy perspective, open up 17% of the target share and 17% of the air yards for Reynolds. Back when Kupp missed week 7 and 8, Reynolds played on 84 and 88% of the team snaps. Called in 2 touchdown passes in that Week 8 game against the Packers as well. So getting that type of snap share on one of the league's best offenses is just incredibly valuable at this time of year. And Reynolds is an outstanding athlete, massive size, big-time catch radius. I'm very much on board with both Anthony Miller and Dante Moncrief as well, too. So Miller was a baller in college, absolutely dominated. And we saw last week Moncrief was #1 in Josh Hermsmeyer's air yards model, and he broke out in a big way. So Keelan Cole's out. So I think all 3 guys here are very much in play.
All right, and because kickers are people too.
Yes, they also have feelings.
Yes, many of the top scoring guys are on bye this week, so think long and hard about this one, Ryan. Who are you targeting if you need a kicker off the waiver wire?
Oh, man.
I know.
Answer the question.
I know.
I don't play in the league with a kicker, and you shouldn't either, and demand more from your commissioner. It's 2018. This is unacceptable. But for the sake of the show, I'm a company guy. I went and did a little bit of research, and we get some scoring going on here in the Tampa Bay Giants game. It looks like Aldrich Rojas is the kicker for the Giants. That's a thing. Although in Tampa Bay, typically if you get in the red zone, they let you score a touchdown. But the Giants have been so ineffective in the red zone. Eli Manning, you can thank him for that. So I think he'll be able to find a way to stall against Tampa Bay, and that should leave some field goal opportunities for Ross here.
Steve, I heard you just hysterically laugh out of that one.
He loves this question.
Yeah.
I mean, you know when you're in like that job interview and they're like, sell this pen to me. Like, it's still a pen at the end of the day, and kickers are still kickers. I mean, I don't even know what the question was. How do I sell a kicker? I mean, they kick. I mean, so Jake Elliott's cool. I guess he's an option. I mean, he's going up against the Saints on the Eagles there. So, I mean, obviously there's going to be plenty of scoring opportunities for there. He's 14 for 18 on the year, so that's pretty good too. So that's cool. But yeah, so sure, pick him up if you want.
Very convincing there, Steve. Reed.
Yeah, I mean, it's a kicker.
Convince us. Sell us this
it's like baller's
pen.
ball. I love that analysis. It's my favorite.
Sell us the pen, Reed, please.
Sell us a pen. I had a pen right here. The pen is royal blue. No, that was a liar joke. But no, I mean, we kickers, yes. If you play in a league, if you follow Jake Seeley for the first, I think, 4 or 5 weeks, he's playing a league where he had a kicker spot that he left empty, and he was, I think, undefeated. So kind of gives you an idea of the value of kickers. Now, Will Lutz and these guys and Greg Zuerlein are guys that potentially can do well, give you 10 points. My guy, I just kind of check my notes. Ryan Suckup, Tennessee versus Indiana, he's 40% owned. Look, Tennessee, this could be a shootout game, or even if it's not, right, these division games that we see that come sometimes are, 12-9. Suckup is a guy that, again, is not heavily owned. Tennessee has not been a team that's been known to score, but we've seen their offense kind of go forward. And Tennessee on 4th downs, 10 attempts, they've only achieved it 5 times. It gives you some statistics on kickers that Vrabel's probably kicking it when he's on 4th down. So,
oh boy,
yeah. Way to
check your shoulder there, Reed. Reaching for that. Reaching
a little bit.
Way to overcome the adversity, all 3 of you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Appreciate that.
All right. Well, last one for you here. If you're somebody who's been streaming defenses all season, which DST do you like for Week 11, Steve?
Okay, so this question I can get on board with. I mean, the Cardinals. It's hard not to like the Cardinals against the Raiders team that just can't score at all. I mean, they've scored no more than 10 points in 4 of their 9 games this season, which would account for 44% of the season. It's getting absolutely pathetic at this point. We thought the Bills were bad. The Raiders are the new Bills right now. I mean, since the beginning of October, they've scored 10, 3, 28, 3, and 6. Let that sink in for a second.
Okay.
You back with me? Cool.
Yep.
Cardinals. Awesome this week.
Ryan, which DST would you prefer streaming?
Yeah, with Steve here. I mean, really the answer is you stream against the Bills and the Raiders whenever possible. The Bills are on a bye, so that leaves it to the Raiders. I'm guessing the Cardinals aren't owned in a lot of leagues, so that puts them in play. Steve mentioned the ineptitude offensively. They've scored 10 or fewer in 6 of the last 7. The Cardinals actually are, for all their woes, they have the 6th best adjusted sack rate of the season, so they have some playmakers. They can get some pressure. And Derek Carr has really had his hands full of late too. So also, if you're looking a week ahead, Baltimore, they've struggled a little bit. In Week 12, they get the Raiders. So snatch them up if they're available too.
All right. Let's see. Reed, you're on the Cardinals train as well. Can you give us maybe another one?
Yeah, I mean, Cardinals first and foremost. Anyone going up against the Raiders, you have to do it. So Steve's hit the nail on the head there. Pittsburgh is interesting. We picked them up last time too. Probably a week ago. So if you wanted to hold on to him, or 2 weeks ago, if you wanted to hold on to him, maybe another team dropped them. I think when you look at going up against Jacksonville, right, you kind of always want to go up against Bortles. Even if they hadn't ball off to Fournette, that plays right into Pittsburgh's hands. They're a lot better in defending the pass. They're top 10 in DVOA in terms of defensive line, getting to the quarterback quite a bit. So that's another defense that I do like in Pittsburgh. So if not the Cardinals, pick up Pittsburgh.
Guys, you did such an amazing job that we've decided to have you back for some over-under coming up. So you're welcome.
Yes.
But first, it's NBA Tears of Joy with Nick and Josh.
Tyler Sullivan here with your DraftKings Fantasy Flash. The Jimmy Butler era in Philly is about to kick off on Wednesday night, but the newest 76er will be debuting outside the city of brotherly love. After being shipped out of Minnesota, Butler and his new team will honeymoon down in Orlando and take on the Magic. Through 10 games this season, Butler is averaging around 21 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, and nearly 2.5 steals per game. And all that comes out to a clean 41 DK point per contest average this year. Now that Butler is with Philly, things get interesting to see how these numbers will swing and how the starting rotation is constructed around Butler. Of course, Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid will continue to start and be studs, but this move could move former #1 overall pick Markelle Fultz to the bench in place for some more reliable shooters. As it relates specifically to this matchup for Butler, however, this could be a tough one as Orlando does rank inside the top 10 in the league and fewest points allowed so far this year.
Jimmy Butler may not be debuting tonight, but we still got plenty of options for you to choose from in tonight's Tiers contest. So without further ado, we bring in RotoWire's Nick Whalen and Josh Engelman of Awesemo.com.
All right, Tier 1 has James Harden, who's coming off his best game of the season, or you could go with Kevin Durant, Kemba Walker, Nikola Jokic. Nick, who do you like the most here?
You know, I thought about going Kemba, but I think there's some blowout potential in that game against Cleveland. He was pretty quiet when they blew out Cleveland a little over a week ago. So I'm going to go James Harden. He's at $10,500 tonight. Yeah, I know Denver's a much improved defensive team this year, but I'm still going to take my chances with Harden. He's coming off of a 66 DraftKings point game the other night against Indiana, and that's a Pacers team that's, you know, just 2 spots below Denver in terms of defensive rating right now, almost an identical number. So, you know, comparable production against a very good Indiana defense. Harden had 8 made threes in that game. He's really kind of started to take the reins back of this offense that's been so inconsistent early on. His last 2 games alone, he has 47 field goal attempts, 31 three-point attempts, 28 free throw attempts. That's the last 2 games. And he's adding over 7 assists per game this year, even chipping in some defensive numbers. He has at least 1 steal in each of his last 10 games. He has 5 blocks over his last 4 games. So certainly not the type of production defensively that we can expect James Harden to sustain, but it's been a nice little bonus over this last week and a half.
Josh, where are you going on this? You have 4 players to choose from in Tier 1. You have a 25% chance of getting it right.
I actually have different numbers than that, but I'm going to have to agree. I have James Harden, and it's close for me. I have Harden and Durant roughly around 40% chances of being the top scorer in this tier in my model. I assume Kevin Durant will be more popular just because of the game situation with Draymond Green out. So if that's the case and his ownership is higher in this tier, I would want to go to Harden to try to offset that ownership. Not really loving Kemba or Jokic here.
Yeah, so Tier 2 has Chris Paul, who's averaging at least 5 fantasy points more than anybody else in this group. As you mentioned, Draymond Green is out, apparently suspended.
Yep.
So with him out, is Chris Paul the clear-cut choice here, Josh?
He is, but it's probably a coin flip that it's Murray, Trae Young, or Klay Thompson. I know I'm giving too many different guys there. Chris Paul is the clear best option, but you do want to weigh that against your first tier pick. If you're putting in Harden, you may want to look elsewhere. If you're going to go Durant, then I'd probably prefer Chris Paul in this spot. But Paul is by far the best option in Tier 2.
Nick, how do you feel about Chris Paul?
I don't dislike Chris Paul, but, like you said, I think if I'm going to go Harden in Tier 1, you maybe offset that with someone else. I don't know where we really draw the line in Tier 2, but I went with Klay Thompson. He's at 6,800. Maybe he qualifies closer to Tier 3. I'm not sure. But, as we just alluded to, it's going to be the KD and it's going to be the Klay show tonight with no Steph Curry, with no Draymond Green. Even without Draymond, I'm fully expecting Golden State to bounce back from that loss last night. I don't know if there's a better team to do it against than the Atlanta Hawks. Klay always seems to step up his production when Curry's out. He had 45 DraftKings points last night. That was his best game in the month of November. He took 31 shots in that game, including 16 threes. And, of course, part of that is the fact that they didn't have Curry. The game went into overtime. Durant fouled out in overtime. But at the end of the day, it just speaks to the fact that without Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson's usage goes up, his shot attempts go up. And even though he might not have the highest ceiling because he doesn't provide the other counting stats, I think this could be a big scoring night for Klay.
All right, Nick, tier 3, who do you like?
I hate to say this. He's one of my least favorite players to watch. He's somebody that I've complained endlessly about over the years. But Tristan Thompson at 5,700, they continue to play Tristan Thompson over Larry Nance, which I know has been frustrating for a lot of people who are high on Nance before the season. But Tristan has double-doubles in his last 3 games. He had 22, 12, and 2 steals against the Bulls the other night. He's got 43 rebounds in his last 3 games alone. I mean, if you want to look the other way on this, he did struggle last time that these two teams met, just 8 points and 7 rebounds. That was 10 days ago. But the Hornets are an average at best rebounding team. So I think Thompson, is able to get to that 12 points, 12 rebounds, type of production that we've come to expect from him now over these last 3 or 4 games.
Josh, Nick really hates himself for taking Thompson. Who do you like here in this tier?
Not Tristan Thompson, unfortunately. Clint Capella is my guy here. And again, you need to balance this with what you're doing in tier 1 and tier 2 with Harden and or Paul. But Capella is the guy that projects highest for me in this tier, just under 36 DK points. The next closest guy for me, if I was doing it, and this is a guy that I don't particularly love, but Nick Batum is standing out to me as the second highest projection in my model. So I would be leaning to Batum, and I don't expect him to be popular at all in this tier.
All right, how about a player from the final 3 tiers that you see as a must-play, Josh?
Must play. That's a strong stance.
It is.
It's probably Jordan Clarkson in tier 4. There's not a lot going on in Cleveland, and he's one of the few guys on that team that actually does look for his own shot. So I'm willing to bet on Clarkson. My other long shot would be someone like Alex Len, but I'm pretty terrified about that one too.
Pretty scared of that one. So who do you think it is maybe a must play, or I guess must play has to be stronger than that. Maybe not in there, just a must play from the final 3 tiers. Nick.
I think maybe must play is the much better way to put this, honestly. I'm going to go with Trey Lyles. He's been a favorite around the RotoWire office of late. Basically been locked into 20-plus minutes a night since Will Barton went down. But, unfortunately, Juancho Hernan-Gomez has kind of started to slice into that workload a little bit, preventing him from getting up over 25 on a lot of nights. But still, Lyles has at least 22 DraftKings points in 8 of his last 10 games. Certainly not the highest ceiling, but his floor is relatively high for a guy who's priced at $4,600.
All right, slate approved pick time, people. Josh, who is your lock for tonight's slate? Some guy you're throwing in your lineup no matter what.
It's got to be Kevin Durant, right? No Draymond Green, no Steph Curry. He has free reign to do everything that he wants to do against an Atlanta team that is just absolutely dreadful. So your only worry is really the blowout risk. I assume that if they're blowing them out, Durant's got a big part of it. So my guy's Kevin Durant.
Yeah, you got me sold on it. Nick, where are you going?
Yeah, I love Durant as well. But, for contrarian reasons, I'll just go with Quinn Cook. He's a little bit cheaper. Certainly somebody you can pair with Kevin Durant. I know he was a huge disappointment last night, only ended up playing 22 minutes in that overtime loss to the Clippers, but I think he ends up having a higher floor tonight. If this is a blowout, he's not really a guy that you'd worry about the Warriors resting in the second half. So I'll take a chance on Quinn Cook bouncing back at this price.
All right, thanks, guys. We're going to have you back for Chaser Fade in a bit, but first, we've got our NFL panel coming back to join us right after Pat Mayo drops some running back knowledge on ya.
David Johnson gets Detroit, Atlanta, and the Rams in the fantasy playoffs.
Awesome.
Christian McCaffrey, as we pounded the drum for like 5 straight weeks, people were like, he sucks so much.
He's the best buy low candidate out there, and you're seeing. We talked about the schedule.
He's not anymore.
No, of course not. We talked about the schedule, and I think he's just diving into that nice schedule right now.
Yeah, he's starting it now, but in the playoffs, he gets Cleveland, New Orleans, and Atlanta. Mixon gets the Chargers, who should be better if Bosa's back by that time. Oakland and Cleveland, weeks 15 and 16.
That's pretty good.
Denver, we talked about. San Francisco, Cleveland, and Oakland. They get Cincinnati the week before that in week 13. Melvin Gordon gets Cincinnati, Kansas City, and then Baltimore in week 16. But I think he's game flow dependent enough that he can do well against a bad D or a tough D.
The thing is,
Baltimore's D hasn't looked all that great lately.
It hasn't. They were against Connor. Connor ripped him up. And I think the best thing about Gordon, even if he's going up against a tough run defense, is his involvement in the passing game. Right, he's getting a lot of targets. What I've noticed from him is he's getting almost 2 more targets per game. He's catching almost 2 more balls per game, and a lot of his work, he leads the Chargers in red zone, not just rushing attempts, targets. That's valuable.
So, Minnesota. Dalvin Cook is still. It sucks that he had the great game right before the bye. Like, oh yeah, he's healthy. Because we've been talking about it. Just buy Dalvin Cook. Buy Dalvin Cook. In the playoffs, he gets at Seattle. Pretty decent matchup. Neutral matchup, if nothing else. Miami at Detroit. That's a league winner.
Yeah, well, we saw yesterday Aaron Jones had the big breakout. Part of that was on Miami. They just can't stop anybody on the ground. They've really struggled against running backs.
So here are the players with the hardest schedules, weeks 14
I'm
to
nervous
16.
about this, actually.
Todd Gurley, number one.
Running backs. Yeah.
Although they were counting Philly as a hard matchup, and I don't know if that's true.
Zeke is awesome. Let's give Zeke
So is
some
Gurley.
credit. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, the Rams play the Eagles.
If you had Gurley right now, and you're in first place in your league or you're in the playoffs, would you trade Gurley for a package? Like, if you could get
It's a good question.
a
really
number
good
one
question.
receiver, let's say you could get
Julio's had a couple touchdowns now. Maybe you can't get Julio.
DeAndre Hopkins coming off a bye, maybe,
Yeah.
and then be able to get Kerryon Johnson or get Delvin Cook or Joe Mixon, someone like that.
Yeah,
Because Gurley carries a lot of weight.
I would do that. If I could get myself a borderline RB1 and a wide receiver 1, yes. I don't know if anybody's going to do that, but I would, yes, 100%.
Hello again. We are happy to have all of you back. We're happy to see the glorious return of our NFL panel, which today consists of Ryan Noonan of the Quant Edge, the DK Live duo of Reed Fowler and Steve Buchanan as well.
Time to look at some projected game totals, and you guys are going to tell us if they're going over or under the mark. So big news of the day is the Chiefs and Rams Monday Night Football game in Mexico City has been moved to LA because of poor field conditions south of the border. A lot of players were talking about maybe not playing because they were concerned about it.
Thank goodness they will.
Yeah, but this contest gives us the highest over-under for Week 11. The line is set at 63 right now. Are you going over or under for this one, Reed?
Yeah, I'm going over here, and we were talking a little bit before the show in terms of when these games have these high implied game totals. Since 2003, 11 games have been around 57.5 for an implied game total, and all 11 have hit the over. And 3 of those games have been in 2018, most notably either with Kansas City, New Orleans, and these high-scoring offenses. So I'm going to say over here. We've seen it. This is the highest since 1986 in terms of game total. So it should be a shootout. Thank God they moved this. And all the Todd Gurley and Mahomes guys are all safe. So I'm going to say over here.
Steve, do you feel like it's going to be a shootout as well?
I mean, you have to think that. I mean, when you hear 63, like, you have to think for a second, like, can it actually realistically go over? Because it's such an absurd number. But, I mean, these are two teams. I mean, the Chiefs are averaging 35.3 points per game. The Rams are averaging 33. So if they just hit their average, we're in the over. So you have to think that this game is going to go over here. It's hard to think that this isn't going to be nothing less of a slugfest in this game. But, yeah, even with the 63 number, as high as that seems, as absurd as it sounds, I still think it goes over.
Okay, Ryan, seems like the numbers are all pointing towards the over on this one.
Yeah, can you imagine backing the under here and just watching this game and just not cheering for points? Like,
yeah,
probably watch blackjack and cheer for the house. I don't get it. But the public is on the over here as well. We got 51% of the bets and 67% of the money back in the over so far. Obviously, the loss of Cooper Kupp, some of the secondary receiving options, Sammy Watkins heading into this game, perhaps less than 100%, maybe hurts it a little bit. But Steve mentioned, I mean, these offenses have just been prolific. And really, the defenses have allowed those offenses to continue to push for 4 quarters as well. That's not going to be any different here. Reed mentioned some of the historical facts here. I think I have only one time in the past 18 years that a game is closed with a total north of 57. Has that game gone under? So I'm definitely leaning early in the week on the over as well.
Reed, what a statistic you just dropped on everyone there.
Yeah.
Well done. You have done your homework. While
get used to it.
While also watching a lot of Queen videos.
Thanks, Steve.
Big fan of the band. All right, the Saints have the best offense in the league. They have not lost since week 1. They're facing the Eagles on Sunday. You see this game going over or under 54.5 points, Ryan?
Yeah, man, you mentioned the Eagles absolutely beat up. They lost Ronald Darby this week, too, for the season. And the Saints, really, since laying an egg in week 1, have just been absolutely dynamic. 54 is a little rich, but, Philly's defense has been – they're not exactly what we've seen last year, but they're still top 5 in touchdowns per drive, points per drive, and touchdowns per red zone opportunity. That obviously changes a little bit when you're playing down in New Orleans in the Dome. So despite that, I'm going to still lean over here early in the week. I do think as things kind of play out, I probably would isolate the Saints team total. I think at 31.5 right now. I think they can comfortably go over that against anyone.
54.5 points for this one. Where you going, Reed, over or under?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Ryan here in the over. 2 games, right, in terms of when the Saints have hit the over, when it's the line's been, or the over-under has been at this point, they've scored close to 40 or 40-plus points. And so even if Philadelphia can't find a way to score points, like that part of the line scares you, right? They're, I believe, 21st in points per game, 3 and 6. When covering the over, the Saints have the capability of doing so. Again, their run defense for Philadelphia is pretty bad. We saw Ezekiel Elliott just run rampant all over them. That kind of scares you in terms of potentially they just hand the ball off. They're up by 2 or 3 scores. But still, 45, they've averaged quite a bit of points, even with these lines, and the team's doing not that well. So I'm going to stay over here as well.
Steven, what are the chances you're taking the under?
0. I mean, look, you got to take the over on this one. I mean, both teams both some great offenses, both have extremely poor secondaries. I mean, if you're the Eagles and you're really hoping and praying that Jalen Mills gets back in your lineup for this week, you got some issues because Mills has been absolutely horrendous this season, but they just have undrafted rookie corners at this point, at this juncture right now in their secondary. I mean, look, the Saints are averaging an average of 51.7 DK fantasy points to opposing receivers. Eagles 43.7 DK fantasy points to opposing receivers. And that is just absolutely absurd. So you have to think this is going to be a high scoring affair. And then let's not even forget, too, this is an Eagles offense that we haven't even seen that fully deploys Golden Tate. He only played on 29% of their snaps against the Cowboys, wasn't really involved at all. So if this offense is clicking and then they're deploying Golden Tate in there as well, I think it should be a good high-scoring affair.
The Cowboys, guys, they've been quietly good on defense, giving up the 3rd fewest points in the league. Will their game against the Falcons go over or under 48 points, Steve? Both these teams trying to keep the seasons alive.
Yeah, I think this one goes over as well. I mean, yes, the Cowboys have been good defensively, but they really haven't been tested as of late. I mean, they haven't really faced any offensive juggernauts lately, okay? They faced the Titans, the Redskins, and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Sorry, Emerson. As of late, those have been their past 3 games. Now they're getting a red-hot Matt Ryan, who even in a losing effort against the Browns, where the team scored just 16 points, he still threw for 330 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 24.5 DK fantasy points. And then the Cowboys, I just think their offensive dynamic has changed so much with Amari Cooper in there. You can't deny how well he looked last night and the week before. It just gives Prescott a viable weapon that he just never had before, unless you count Cole Beasley. But we're not going to count Cole Beasley as a viable weapon. So yeah, I think this one easily goes over.
Reed loves Cole Beasley.
Okay, Reed.
Why?
I don't. It's Emerson obviously giving out fake facts. So I'm going to say over here. I agree with Steve. I think we're pretty optimistic on these lines when we're looking at them. Atlanta, you'd like that Atlanta's going back in the dome or back inside Mercedes-Benz because Matt Ryan is a lot better. Atlanta's a lot better at home. And when you look, again, at this line, and again, that defense, right? Atlanta's defense, we always talk about how good these over-unders are, especially when the defense is bad and the offense is prolific. They're top 10 giving up and top 5 giving up points to receivers, quarterbacks, and running backs. And so when you look at what Dallas is able to do, like Steve mentioned, with the acquisition of Amari Cooper, handing the ball off to Ezekiel Elliott, this is now what they want to do with that strong defense. So averaging 24.5 points over the last 4 games. I think this goes over as well pretty easily.
Ryan, last year, Dallas was defeated by the Falcons in Week 10, 27-7. That was their first game without Zeke. So maybe revenge narrative here. Everybody's going to be going for it. What do you think?
Yeah, you know, I'm not quite as bullish as the guys are here on the over. I would say I probably lean there early in the week. In some spots, you can probably still find it at 47.5, which is where it opens. That's a pretty key number for me. I would like that a little bit more if it stayed below. It's moved up. We've seen a little bit more action early in the week, betting that up to 48. You mentioned the Cowboys. They've been solid, really nice young linebacking core. They're 8th in yards per drive, 4th in points per drive. They also play at an absolutely snail's pace, which always hurts me as a totals better. I want to take a look at pace. Pretty strong in situational, neutral situations. And their road games have gone under 4 of 5 weeks. This past Sunday night against the Eagles was the first over. And then conversely, on the other side, though, the Falcons have gone over at home 4 out of 5 times. So Their defense is atrocious. They do get some help with Jones, their key linebacker, back this week. So I kind of want to see where this number falls as we get closer to Sunday and where it falls within the key numbers.
All right, dudes, the odds makers do not like this game too much. That would be the Raiders and Cardinals. Cardinals, which their defense, you guys all recommended streaming. Well, the line is set at 40.5, which makes you want to go over or under the mark, Reed. Go ahead. Please explain.
Yeah, I'm going under here. I mean, we just talked about it, and we've covered it pretty heavily in terms of how good, right, Arizona's defense has been, top 10 in defensive DVOA through weeks 9 or through week 10. And Oakland has no one. They have a quarterback who's throwing the ball, grounding the ball on 4th and 5, and not just throwing it up there.
Oh, that's embarrassing.
Yeah, their best receiver as their tight end, and Arizona is 6th best for guarding tight ends. So even if you want to potentially get your offense going, I don't think you can do it against Arizona. I have zero faith in Oakland scoring any points for that matter. So I'm going to say under here.
Steve, you won't take the over.
Yeah, I definitely won't. I mean, the Cardinals, they just faced the Chiefs, and they can only muster 14 points. It's like going to a buffet and taking one plate. I mean, what are you doing? There's so many more opportunities and things to try. I mean, if they're not going to score in that type of matchup, why would you think the over is going to happen here? And then I mentioned earlier how bad the Raiders have been offensively, scoring 10 or less points, 44% of the season. I mean, what a nightmare. Just stream the Cardinals defense and call it a day.
Whoa, dude, Ryan, come on. This is going to be an underrated game this weekend.
What do you watch?
Yeah. Imagine living in Arizona and you don't have Sunday ticket and you just have to watch this absolute dumpster fire. Yeah, I mean, it opened at 41. We've already seen it bet down to 40.5, 74% of the money on the under. I mean, Steve obviously passionately railed against them, and rightfully so. I mean, the Raiders have an implied team total here of 18.5. That's a stretch. I mean, Arizona has been inept as a team this season, but defensively they've been pretty solid. I mean, the emergence of David Johnson, I hope you enjoyed that this week, Steve, but that makes the Cardinals a little bit more prolific here. I just don't see how they get to 18.5, and that's we're going to have to get there. I mean, I don't see the Cardinals pushing 30 on this one, so I'm going to lead under. Probably bet the Raiders team total.
No one enjoyed the emergence of David Johnson more than DK Live's Jeff Ulrich, who called that.
Yeah.
Yes, he did.
He did.
One good call this seseason.
I was right here, man.
True.
Oh.
I was there.
You were there too?
Man.
All of us were there.
You know, you skip a
really?
show.
Sorry.
Not me.
And he's big time.
Emerson doesn't care about anyone. That's really
I
what it
care
is,
about
Ryan.
you.
Just his dog.
I
don't even know
definitely
who you
care
are
about
anymore,
you.
Emerson.
Allegedly.
I've never
No,
not
he does
cared
care about
about
us.
you.
Okay. All right. Well,
Anyway, we'll talk after the show, Reed.
yeah. Once again, you guys delivered for the people. A tremendous display of knowledge by all three of you.
Wow.
So hang
Thanks.
tight for a running back edition of Price Check because we need you back.
But wait, there's more. We'll take a gander at tonight's 9-game NHL slate and where you should spend your money.
Tyler Sullivan here with your DraftKings Fantasy Flash. The end of an era in Buffalo as the Bills have released quarterback Nathan Peterman. We now pause for a moment of silence for all the remaining defenses on Buffalo's schedule that we're hoping to face the interception-prone QB. Thank you. But seriously, I think Peterman threw another pick during that moment of silence. Of Peterman's 120 career pass attempts in the regular season, 12 of them went for interceptions. He even threw a pick in one of his 3 throws on a wild card weekend last year. While we like to poke fun at Peterman, he was able to make NFL history. His 9.23% interception rating is the 3rd highest since the AFL-NFL merger in 1970 with as many pass attempts. So we're talking about a record-setting QB here. It's just not the records that you want. Pour out a sip of your drink for the defense that you didn't get to start for Peterman against. It's truly a loss for the ages.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a busy 9-game fantasy hockey slate in the NHL with a couple mouth-watering matchups is what I read on the internet.
And here to help us decide where to spend our money is our NHL DFS expert, Sean Newsham. So Sean, Connor McDavid and Elias Pettersson are the top price centers tonight at $7,900 and $7,700 respectively. Do you prefer McDavid against the Canadiens or Pettersson against the Islanders?
Yeah, you're going to have to give me Connor McDavid all day at this price compared to Elias Pettersson. We talked about Pettersson a little bit yesterday. He's had a fantastic rookie year. He's been just really great at all times. Missed a little bit at the earlier part of the season due to injury, but ever since then, he's been fantastic as well. The difference is McDavid's just the best player in the entire world, and what he does on the ice is just special. Edmonton's in a little bit of a funk recently. They've only scored 2 goals or less in the last 4 games. But I think a matchup against Montreal, where they're one of the second biggest favorites on the entire slate, and against a Montreal team that's just overall very weak, I think you have to take McDavid over Pettersson at that price point.
All right, well, over on the wing, we have Alex Ovechkin, $7,800 against the Wild. Nikita Kucherov versus the Sabres, $400 less. Which one tickles your fancy? What's the difference between these two guys?
Yeah, there's actually not much difference between these two. Usually you see these two up right among the league leaders in shots. You see them right up among the league leaders in Corsi. But they're not there this year. They're a little bit lower than what you normally expect from these two guys. Maybe with Ovechkin, it's a little bit of a hangover. Tampa Bay just hasn't been producing as much. But you look at the matchups, they're both very similar. Minnesota and Buffalo both give up quite a few scoring chances and high danger opportunities. So I think it's a situation where it's a coin flip. So for me, I'd probably take Alexander Ovechkin just due to the fact he's a better long-term player than Kucherov due to his shot volume, especially on the power play. But it's a really close option between the two.
All right, for defenseman, Morgan Riley comes in at the top. He's $6,800 against the Kings. Or we have Brent Burns at $6,700 against the Preds. So which one of these guys are you going with?
Yeah, it's pretty wild at this point in the season. We have this question. Morgan Riley coming into the season was priced about $4,400 or right around there, but he's been fantastic the entire season. And a lot of that's due to the free-flowing style that Toronto plays. But his block shot numbers have been really strong. His shots on goal numbers have been really strong. However, I think for me, I'm still going to go back to Old Faithful and Brent Burns. The matchup isn't fantastic against Nashville, but Brent Burns overall is still the best defenseman when it comes to DFS hockey. He had a very high shot total game the other night as well. And I think it's a reasonable situation for him tonight to be able to prevail. So for me, I would go with the long-lasting Brent Burns.
All right, Andrei Vasilevsky is the highest priced goalie, but you're not going to want to start him because he's just not starting tonight. Next two options after him is backup Louis Domingue, $8,100, facing the Sabres. Frederik Andersen, he clashes with the Kings. He's only $100 more, so who would you rather roster?
For me, I would much rather be looking at Frederik Andersen. The reasoning behind this is the Kings just can't really score at all. And you have a situation where Toronto gives up quite a few shots on goal, so it should be a situation in which that Andersen can get the win and see some saves, which is what you want for your goaltender. However, I would rather go a little bit cheaper. Someone that we talked about before, and the last time I brought them up, they ended up having a 40-save shutout against Chicago, and that is Mikko Koskinen. Edmonton plays tonight against Montreal, as we have talked about. It's a relatively weak matchup, and Koskinen's getting one of his few starts that he'll have on the season. But the last time he got a start in a profitable matchup, it was a very solid outing for him. And I think with him at $7,500, you can just go there for the savings.
All right, before we let you go, how about your slate-approved pick for tonight?
So I've been talking a lot about Edmonton tonight, and I'm just going to go right back there. Leon Draisaitl is $5,400 tonight on DraftKings, and it's a very solid option. You see his production has been sort of reduced from what it was in previous years, but that's because he's been playing center a lot. Tonight, they moved him back on the wing with Connor McDavid, and the last 4 games, they've only scored 6 goals as a team. Half of them have been Draisaitl, and his shot production in the last 3 has been 16 shots. So I think Leon Draisaitl is my slate-approved lock of the slate.
Sean, we appreciate you. So does everyone at home. We will take a look at prices for some of this week's top running backs with our NFL panel after this.
They have Uzma, Heuerman, Ricky Seals-Jones. So I'm with you. I like Heuerman a little bit more than Ricky Seals-Jones. Then it's like Vance McDonald, Ben Watson, Chris Herndon. Jonnu Smith has touchdowns in 2 straight.
He does.
But he's not good.
But he's not great. Like I said, I think that offense is it's playing a lot better now. Who do they have this week? Jacksonville. I like.
No, they have Indy this week. Tennessee and Indy.
Okay, that's right. Not a bad matchup. I like Herndon. And he's involved in the offense nonstop. I mean, you mentioned Robbie Anderson. There's not a lot of options there in the passing game right now. And what does he have? He's got 3-4 touchdowns in the past few weeks.
The problem
he's very touchdown dependent, like all of these.
They're going into bye is the problem.
That is,
like people are like triggered about Uzma because of yesterday and the week before. So he's been bad 2 straight weeks. But no AJ Green.
Yeah,
he's always on the field.
The average is 9.5 targets per game. Like, where are those looks going to go?
They threw the ball 23 times yesterday.
Yeah,
and they were losing the entire game.
It's very puzzling.
Something is off.
Yeah, Ross led the way. What did he have? 6 targets that led the way.
I mean, you can pick up and play Ross if you want to, but
He's
so bad.
Yeah, that's I'm not. I picked him up as an AJ Green owner, and I didn't even want to play him yesterday. In some spots, I went like Maurice Harris, and it turned out they had very similar days.
Except Ross caught the touchdown.
Ross had the touchdown, but at least Harris had still led the way for the Redskins and offensively. You're right about Herndon. Yeah, I forgot that he was on a bye, so I would go the other way. But I am intrigued with him as
Do you like Heuerman more than you like Uzma?
Yeah,
You do?
Yeah, because I don't.
He would be your number one guy.
He would be, because I know maybe that game is slightly a bit of an outlier. His last one was 10 targets, 10 catches.
Yeah.
But like I said about Case Keenum, there's just not a lot. I just don't feel great about it. So yeah, I like him more. I think he's going to be involved in the offense going forward, and he's had a couple decent games.
I can switch those guys.
Like I said, I think Case Keenum, I think he's going to be his number one target.
That's so sad.
It's very sad.
Allow myself to introduce myself. I'm just kidding. I'm going to reintroduce
Okay,
our NFL
Austin.
panel tonight. Yeah, Reed Fowler, Steve Buchanan, and Ryan Noonan. Welcome back to all three of you.
All right, we're price checking some of the running backs in action this week, starting with Melvin Gordon, who comes in at the highest price back on the Sunday slate, the main slate, $8,900. You like this price point against the Broncos, Reed? Is $100 cheaper than he was last week.
Yeah, if you've been watching this show for the entire season, you know I love Melvin Gordon here, and it's exactly the same, right? He's sort of my Tony Finau for football, and the reason why I like this guy is he's uber efficient. He's only playing on 73% of the snaps, but he's got over 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns this season. He's sort of having a Todd Gurley-like season now. It's crazy to say that, but again, uber efficient. And when you look at their competition, right, going against Denver, and you look at Melvin Gordon's schedule moving forward, it's really, really good. So I do like this price before it goes up above that 9K range. Denver is sixth best in terms of giving up the sixth most attempts per game, around 24. And again, they're about top 15 in terms of giving up points to opposing running backs. You look at Austin Eckler, not as involved as we saw at the beginning of the year. It's Melvin Gordon. He's averaging 20 touches and 25 PPR points or DK points. Yeah, 8,900, I like it.
Steve, so Reed loves Melvin Gordon, but he's not in love with him. What about you? 27.5 points for this dude at Oakland last week.
I mean, it's hard to argue a price for somebody who scored less than 22 DK fantasy points only once so far this season, but this is kind of a tough matchup for him. I mean, look, the Broncos had a really tough stretch, weeks 4 through 6. The Chiefs had 127 rushing yards. Todd Gurley and company had 232. And then what the heck was that Jets game when they had 318 rushing yards? I mean, those 3 weeks, though, really have skewed the numbers for the Broncos defense against the run, because the rest of the year it's been 92 yards or less. That's what they've given up the rest of the season. And then you look at what's around him. You look at Saquon Barkley, $200 less against the Buccaneers. Zeke Elliott, $400 less against the Falcons. Heck, even Christian McCaffrey, $900 less against the Lions. Nothing wrong with Gordon overall, but he's definitely not at the top of my pecking order for this week.
Ryan, do you even hesitate spending $8,900 in this guy?
Well, as you so eloquently mentioned, Emerson, he is the highest price back on the slates. There are some other guys in that tier that just are really hard to stay away from as well. I mean, he's a 7-point home favorite. That's nice. I mean, these interdivision games tend to be a little bit slower and more low scoring than we think. I mean, it's an interesting tournament play based on the ownership projections here, but the Broncos have allowed some monster weeks. I mean, Steve mentioned their future Hall of Famers, Isaiah Crowell and Bilal Powell, just tore them apart. We've seen 21st in DVOA against the run for the Broncos on the season. So he's not someone I actually have to jam in, especially in cash, but I think there's obvious tournament upside, and his pass game work raises his floor significantly.
All right, guys, Saquon Barkley had his worst game of the season last night with only 14 fantasy points. Yeah. Do you like him at 8,700 this week against the Bucs, Ryan?
And Tampa Bay has allowed 90% of the red zone possessions against them to end in a touchdown. 90%. The league average is like 58.5. That's really, really hard to do. I mean, you have to like Saquon at home here. All the offensive weapons against the Bucs are really someone we have to like week in and week out. They're 31st in the league defending the pass to running backs. We know that Saquon gets a ton of his value in the passing game. So he's really just a lock to get back into that 20-point total, as we've seen most weeks. He didn't find the end zone last week, but I think he's very much in play at his price this week.
Reed, you like that $8,700 price tag?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, to go off of what Steve was saying last segment, there's a lot of value at the top here. And so you like that ownership potentially being distributed evenly across these guys. But absolutely, I mean, if you look at what Tampa Bay has also given up recently, CMC, Christian McCaffrey, 22 total touches, and you got 30-plus DK fantasy points. Mixon, same thing, 24 total touches, 31 DK fantasy points. So they're not just susceptible against the pass, they are also susceptible against the run. Recent news of Levante David, their linebacker that was playing with Quan Alexander, he could miss some time as well. So all things are kind of turning upside down. We've seen Fitzpatrick throw for 400, 500, whatever it was, total offense, and then only score 3 points. And so when you look at this, this matchup, right, with Saquon Barkley, his worst game gave us 20-plus touches and 100 total yards. I'll take that at that price tag for Saquon being back at home. Absolutely love this price.
Steve, you taking him at that price tag?
I mean, this is the first time Barkley was held under 20 DK fantasy points in his career. He's a rookie. I mean, but it certainly wasn't a lack for production. Like, Reed said, I mean, he had 20 carries for the first time this season. And on paper, it should have been a smash spot for him against the Eagles, but that doesn't faze me at all. But when you think about how fantasy players operate, it's that recency bias, and they go, oh, well, Barkley did nothing for me last week, so I'm not going to take him this week. Sure, I'll happily take him against the Buccaneers, who are easily one of the worst defenses in the league. Absolutely. I don't mind that price at all. Great bounce back spot for him.
All right, Steve, let's get your thoughts on this one. Marlon Mack, 2 straight 30-plus fantasy point games, and then he was a humongous disappointment last week with only 7.8 DK points. Is he worth $6,000 at Tennessee? Go ahead.
I mean, he'll be lucky if he tops that this week. I mean, it's just such a bad matchup for him against the Titans. I mean, we always talk about how good the Ravens are against the run. The Titans are right there with them. I mean, at this point, they've actually allowed less DK fantasy points than the Ravens had at this point. They've only allowed more than 100 rushing yards in 4 of their. Excuse me. Let me start over.
Go ahead.
They allowed more than 100 rushing yards in 4 of their last 5 games.
Nailed it.
Nothing has been able to touch that since. Only around 2 rushing touchdowns on the season. And then you look at what Mac did last week. He only had 12 carries, and he doesn't get enough targets. So if they're still worried about his foot, or if he's still hurting, it's really hard to get excited about him at $6K. So that is an absolute no for me.
Ryan, Steve doesn't really think he could even hit that 7.8 DK point mark again, or doesn't believe he will. So with that in mind, would you drop $6,000 on him against Tennessee?
Yeah, I mean, he only had 12 carries. They only ran the ball 15 times. That's kind of their MO, actually. I mean, nothing's really changed. He's still the clear running back 1 for the Colts. He's just really touchdown dependent. Some of the nice games over the last few weeks since he's been back from his injury have had either 1 or multiple touchdowns. So if he doesn't find the end zone, he's going to disappoint. He's not a complete airball in the passing game, but he's just not heavily involved there. But his team throws a ton. They throw 64% of the time in neutral situations. It's one of the top 5% in the game, or ranking top 5 in the league. So I think this is just going to be a little too rich for my blood with a guy that's that touchdown dependent.
Reed Fowler, Marlon Mack, $6,000 at Tennessee. Is that something you might be interested in?
No, Emerson Lotzia, not at 6,000. Maybe if he was in the mid 5Ks, like potentially, right? Because you could, especially if the ownership is not there. But like these guys mentioned, like if you look at this matchup, Tennessee again is really good defending. Number 1, I believe, total defense after this week, and again against the pass and against the run, really good. Wesley Woodyard, their middle linebacker, is playing extremely well. He's got that team and that defense playing extremely well. Their secondary with Kevin Byard, all playing really, really well. So Marlon Mack, and you still see, right, 60% of the snaps that Mack gets. Nyheim Hines is still part of this backfield. Like Ryan mentioned, they pass on 64% of the time. Their offensive line is blocking for Andrew Luck to get those passing opportunities. So no, at $6,000, don't like it.
Guys, Mark Ingram was a beast in Week 10 with 28 fantasy points. He's pretty cheap this week at $4,700, up $200 from Week 10, but still only $4,700 against the Eagles. Reed, do you like him at that price?
Yeah, I don't mind $4,700 for Ingram, because we see that he has 2 touchdown upside on that ceiling. What you're worried about, though, is since he's come back, right, and Matt Harmon tweeted this out, since the Saints returned from their bye, Alvin Kamara scored 8 touchdowns and averaged 19.5 touches. And so that does scare you a little bit with Mark Ingram, but the price is nice. At $4,700, we can get we saw him get a receiving touchdown last week. This Saints offense is so good. It's like playing these Chiefs or playing these Rams. You can really hone in and potentially get some pivot spots in GPPs and tournaments with a guy like Mark Ingram because he has that upside. And so I don't mind the price at all, especially if the ownership is going to be single digits.
Like Steve, Des Bryant, Cam Meredith, both recently out. So do you think they're going to lean on the backfield? Do you think that we could see Mark Ingram continuing to get these kind of fantasy points?
I mean, it's hard not to love him at this price point. I mean, it's a great price point, great matchup. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's a trap. But, I mean, even with the timeshare that he and Kamara have, I mean, Ingram scored 28.2 DK fantasy points last week. Kamara had 26.2. I mean, it's essentially a 50-50 split. And the snap count was 37 for Kamara, 31 for Ingram. So, I mean, Philly is not a good defense on the ground, despite what Saquon Barkley might tell you today. I mean, look, Ingram can still get it done in the air or through, rushing touchdown in the end zone there. In a matchup like this, where there should be a lot of high-scoring opportunities here, I have zero issue with going with Ingram here. I think he's totally viable.
Ryan, that Philly defense giving up 4.5 yards per carry on the year. So do you like Ingram in this spot at 4,700?
Yeah, I would echo the sentiments the guys laid out. I don't think you need to go there in cash. But in tournaments, because Breeze, Thomas, and Kamara are going to rightfully soak up all the ownership at 4,700, I think he's very much in play. I mean, you're looking at some pretty neutral timeshare since Ingram's been back, but the reality is it's really been game script dependent. More so than last year. Kamara is getting that work inside the 5. Last week Ingram had a touchdown on a screen pass, but that was a big play. So it's not quite the timeshare it was last year. It definitely is skewing heavier to Kamara. But again, if you can get a guy with a team total up, close to 35, and it's going to be under 10% owned, I think there's some options here in tournaments.
Ryan, Steve, and Reed, wonderful job today. Go enjoy the night.
You too, guys.
Thank you so much.
Especially you, Jessie.
Oh my gosh, wow, thank you. We always say great job, guys, but it's nice to hear that we're also doing a good job.
Yeah, I know. We don't hear that enough around here.
Yeah.
All right, we're chasing and fading. NBA game spreads next.
It's your DraftKings Fantasy Flash. I'm Taralyn Azak. The Dolphins lost to Green Bay on Sunday, but they had a little good news when quarterback Ryan Tannehill was able to resume throwing without pain, according to coach Adam Gase. Tannehill has been sidelined 5 games with a right shoulder injury. Miami wants their QB back. He won't solve all of their issues, but Phil and Brock Osweiler has been less than impressive. In Tannehill's absence, the Dolphins have gone 2-3, and Osweiler hasn't thrown a touchdown in their last 3 games. What could Tannehill's return mean for your fantasy team? The quarterback's go-to guy early in the season was Kenny Stills. Those two hooked up for 3 touchdowns in the first 3 weeks, 2 of them going for over 30 yards. Expect Stills to once again be a deep threat with Tannehill back under center. The Dolphins are on a bye this week, but are hoping their main man will be back on the field in Week 12 when the Dolphins visit the Colts.
Final block of the show, which means we are almost done, but we have just enough time left to chase or fade some of the game spreads around the NBA tonight.
And that's why we have RotoWire's Nick Whalen and Josh Engelman of Awesemo.com here. So we begin with the Hawks, 12.5-point underdogs in Golden State tonight. Remember,
no Draymond
Green suspended for
the
1
locker
game
room fight
by the team. Yes, correct. Chase or fade, the Hawks cover, Nick.
I think I'm going to fade it. The Hawks have been better than I expected in some ways this year. I mean, I really thought that they were just going to get eviscerated on a night-to-night basis, but Trae Young being better than I thought has kind of gone a long way to dispel that. But still, 12.5 points for this Warriors team, even without Draymond, even without Steph. To me, that's really not too much to ask. And I saw on Twitter, actually, after the Draymond news came back, in the time that we had between our last segment and this one, that some books actually moved the line up a half point in favor of the Warriors after the Draymond news came down. So to me, that really doesn't affect things all that much. I think they'll be coming out looking to avenge last night's loss. This is a team that very rarely loses 2 in a row, and certainly a team that, even without those 2 all-NBA caliber players, is light years ahead of the Atlanta Hawks. So KD's upset, Draymond's upset, everyone's upset, but the Warriors are playing at home. I think Clay, like I said in the last segment, and KD especially are going to go off, and Golden State comfortably cruises to a win by at least 13 points.
Sweatometer going off for that one. Hot take. A lot of hot
Great
takes
stuff,
in the internet streets right now, Josh. So what do you think? Do you think that even though Draymond Green is suspended for a game, we're still going to see Golden State take this one? The Hawks cover, chase, or fade it?
I'm actually going to say that the Hawks cover this game.
Ooh.
And it's not because I expect the Hawks to be playing particularly well. I'm just looking at it from a standpoint of their benches in the fourth quarter. And if it's someone like Jeremy Lin is out on the court in the fourth getting blowout run, I like his chances against the scrubs of Golden State right now that they're thin. So I'm looking at this more like a backdoor cover than just a straight up the Hawks play well.
All right, Josh. Well, while you're here.
Hot take.
Yeah, the sweatometer on this side.
Yeah.
Sweatometer going off. Next up, though, Rockets are 4-point underdogs against the Nuggets. Chase or fade the Rockets cover here, Jay?
I'm going Nuggets here. And this one is the one that I have the most confidence in. This Rockets team has just been not great this season. Atrocious offensively, atrocious defensively. And it's a lot different when you don't have Trevor Ariza and Luc Mbah Moute, and you go to guys like Isaiah Hartenstein and Gary Clark. It's just not the same team any longer. And I don't think not having Melo is going to save them here. Nuggets are clicking, and I would greatly prefer the Nuggets in this one.
All right, Nick. Josh is pretty confident here in the Nuggets. What about you?
I can say with very little certainty that I'm going to chase the Rockets in this one. Hard to disagree with anything that he said, but the Rockets have been basically impossible to figure out on a night-to-night basis so far. Last 3 games have been blown out by the Thunder without Russ. They only put up 89 points against the Spurs team that just lost to the Kings, and then they come back and blow out a pretty good Pacers team the other night. So, I guess I'm going to come back to what I said about James Harden earlier. I do like the way that he's played. He was wildly inefficient in that Spurs game, but he's at least getting back to the type of usage numbers that I want to see from him. And if the Rockets get anything out of Eric Gordon, I think that's going to go a long way towards kind of righting the ship for them. Obviously Melo's been a disaster. I agree that they probably underestimated the losses of Mbah Moute and Trevor Ariza. But a big part of the reason that they've struggled, especially on offense, is Eric Gordon has just not looked like himself. So if he's able to get back on track tonight, I think Houston's able to cover this, but that's a pretty big if.
All right, guys, finally, the Cavaliers are 8.5-point home dogs against the Hornets. Chase or fade that the Cavs are going to cover that one tonight, Nick?
I'm going to fade. I don't think the Hornets are any good, but I think the Cavs are quite a bit worse. They've managed to lose 3 straight games by less than 10 points, the Cavs, that is. And the fact that I'm even phrasing that like it's an accomplishment, I think says a lot. That Orlando team that they barely lost to is not good. OKC didn't have Russ in that game. They barely lost to Chicago, which is not a very good team. Cavs are without Korver, Osman, Sam Decker, George Hill, Kevin Love. That means a lot of Jordan Clarkson, a lot of Rodney Hood, a lot of Colin Sexton. Those are guys who can get their numbers. They're not necessarily winning players. And Charlotte's played well of late. I'm not super high on them as an actual, playoff contender type of team in the East, but they've won 4 of their last 6, including a 32-point win over these very Cavs 10 days ago. Their last 4 losses have come by a combined 9 points, and just 4 of their 6 losses this season have come by 4 points or fewer. They only have 2 losses of more than 4 points. So I'll give me the Hornets to cover this one. This is more about me just really being down on this Cavs team.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are really down on this Cavs team.
Quite a bit.
Most people, I would say.
Yeah, not much of a take there.
No, but the sweatometer is like, yeah, we know. Josh.
Not moving at all.
Are you chasing or fading this one?
Yeah, I don't think the Cavs are covering this one. I don't really know who the best player on this team is. You could probably name 5-6 different guys that are active right now. Yeah. None of them should be the answer to that question ever, regardless. So I like the Hornets here. And it's sort of similar to what I was thinking about for Atlanta and Golden State, in that I just simply think that the Hornets' second unit is better than Cleveland's in a blowout. And I just don't think they're going to get back. I don't know who creates for them outside of Jordan Clarkson. It's a bad Cavs team.
Hey, going off that, is Melo a good fit in Cleveland? Well, what do you think, Josh?
I don't think he's really a good fit anywhere any longer.
Look at Nick's face.
I don't know, maybe in China.
Yeah.
Honestly, Melo might want to go to Cleveland. If that's what he wants to do, is just go and put up a 38% usage rate the rest of the year and win 15 games, then more power to him.
We did an office poll today about where we thought Melo would go, and Emerson said retirement.
Yeah, I did say that.
Yeah, you did.
I will likely win because I win everything. Thanks, guys. We appreciate you. Thanks to everyone at home as well, wherever you're watching, however you're watching, we appreciate it. As a friendly reminder, go ahead.
We'll be back tomorrow night at 6. We host this show 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. You can watch us on Facebook Live. YouTube, Twitter, and the DK Live app.
And we tweet out some pretty funny videos throughout the week
Yeah,
as
we do.
well.
Yeah.
Great
So
promos
like,
for the
share,
show.
subscribe, use our code. Just kidding. All right. We'll see you guys tomorrow at 6 o'clock.
Hot take!
The Sweat Hot Take. We'll see you at 6.